So the biggest shocks that I could find from King were 4.5-inch bypass shocks and coilovers. They actually sometimes call them coil carriers. At least that's what the off-road guys call them, but King doesn't necessarily call them that. They also don't show coil carriers on their website. A coil carrier is just a coil over without any oil in it. So it's assuming that you're going to use that in addition to a bypass shock without a coil on it. So the coil carrier bears the weight and the bypass shock does all the damping. So I'm making sure that I have enough room for all of those shocks. This is an old model that I had made years ago on a different buggy design, and it just so happened to be the right outside diameter. And I'd already gone through the work of making the top and bottom mounts and putting the spherical bearings in there. So I'm just going to save this assembly into my Ultra 4 folder, and then I can modify these parts. Alternatively, you could do a pack and go on this part, which is what I ended up doing for the coil carrier, but I wasn't sure how the McMaster parts would act if I did a pack and go with a suffix on the end of it. It ended up being okay. So these shocks need to be 20-inch stroke. So the housing and the shaft need to be 20 inches each. And then I'm going to use about 16 inches of the stroke. So saving all of these parts so that I can edit them. What I like to do on shock assemblies is make different configurations of them. So I've got an upper configuration, a lower configuration, and then the default so that I can load the assemblies in and then swap the configurations to make them line up with each other so that you have two discrete assemblies representing the same shock, but they're able to cycle independently of each other. So now we're looking at the coil carrier, and this is a really cool part because I used a spiral cut to represent the threads. I didn't want to rebuild this because I remember this part of it being kind of tricky, getting those spiral bosses to line up to represent the threads. And it just looks really cool as it is, and it's the right size. So just decided to use that as it is. So I need to modify some of the dimensions here. The previous design that I used these on had an unrealistic amount of wheel travel because I didn't really know that much about CV angle constraints. And I was also referencing like monster truck nitro shocks, which are way bigger than anything you would use in like a race application. They're just the biggest shocks that King makes.